Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday. I know the news we got yesterday about not going back to school is not the news we wanted to hear, but most importantly, we want to keep everyone safe, especially our students. As updates come, I'll let you know what those are. Also, if you need directions for those new resources that I posted on Google Classroom, again, those are not mandatory, but they're resources for you. They're on my Google Classroom and the Connected Campus Google Classroom if you would like to access those. And the instructions for that are on day one's video. So without further ado, I won't talk a lot today. Let's get started reading. So yesterday we picked up with chapter 1 and some of chapter 2 with Mike Lupica and the $1 Million Throw. So today we're going to find out if Nate is able to buy the football that he's been saving for, the Tom Brady signed football. All right. Also, students, grab a paper, pencil, crayon, whatever you want to get to write with, because I have some questions to ask you, and you can jot those answers down as we're reading. Okay. All right. Nate read about money in sports all the time. Read about the money the top athletes, including Tom Brady, were making. Some of them, like LeBron and A-Rod and Tiger Woods, were making. Some of them were making up to hundreds of millions of dollars. But since he'd had his eye on this ball, it wasn't their salaries that seemed like the biggest number in sports. It was the cost of this one signed football. When he told his mom and dad about it, they told him that if he was willing to save up, if it was the present he wanted the most, they would have to pay half. It would be a way of earning something off the field the way he always had on it, or earning a good grade in school, which they always told him should mean more to him because they all knew school came harder to him. And his parents had stayed with the promise, even though things were different now in their house than they had been when he'd finished 6th grade. Everything was different now. That his dad was working 2 jobs after losing the only one Nate had ever known him to have, at the big commercial real estate company he used to work for. "You don't have to do this," Nate had said to his dad one day. "I can't wait and save up the whole $500 myself, even if it does take longer." "Actually, I have to do this more than ever," his dad said. "I don't understand," Nate said. "A promise is a promise," his dad had said, "even if it's one you make only to yourself." For all Nate knew, his parents had been saving up for the Brady Bowl right along with him, waiting for the day when there was finally enough money in the top drawer of his desk to make the trip to sports stuff he'd been dreaming about for what seemed like forever. Sports Stuff had become one of the biggest sporting good chains in New England. They didn't just sell the usual stuff, sneakers and spikes and jerseys and t-shirts, basketballs and hockey sticks and gloves and bats and balls. The thing that set Sports Stuff apart was a section of every store known as the Hall, as in the Hall of Fame. That's where the coolest stuff in the place really was. The collectibles, all the signed balls and jerseys and memorabilia, all authentic. Signed sneakers, some of them looking as big as a bathtub to Nate. Baseball and football cards, some real old, some really valuable, perfectly preserved behind or under the glass. Nothing was more valuable, at least to Nate's eyes, than the Brady Bowl. Tom Brady had been Nate's guy from the time Nate first started playing organized football in the 4th grade and started watching pro football games with his dad on Sunday afternoons. In fact, the first game Nate really remembered watching or caring about was Brady's first Super Bowl against the St. Louis Rams. That was the day he'd driven the Patriots down the field at the end of the game, even though he was basically a rookie. Brady had driven them down the field against a Rams team. Nate knew from his dad was a two-touchdown favorite. Got them close enough to the end zone that Adam Vinatieri could do something he would do again a few years later for the Patriots, kick a field goal to win the Super Bowl as time ran out. Vinatieri got to make that end-of-game kick again because Brady drove the Patriots down the field again in Super Bowl 43, this time against the Carolina Panthers. The first time, though, was the one Nate knew he would always remember best. He didn't understand everything that was happening in the game. didn't understand everything the announcers were saying, no matter how patient his dad had been explaining things. Nate just understood in his heart that there was magic in the room that night. Not just because he was getting to stay up later than he ever had to watch the ending of a game, but because he was sharing this night and this ending and this one amazing football game with his dad. Ever since, there had been the same kind of magic for Nate every time he watched Brady play quarterback for the Patriots. There was that kind of magic even after Brady hurt his knee and lost that time from the prime of his career. The two of them had shared something important with that first Super Bowl, even if Tom Brady had never known it. Anybody can do it when the pressure's not on, his dad would say when Brady had turned into 2-minute Tom again. It's when you're under pressure. When the whole world's looking at you and your teammates are looking to you, that's the measure of a champion in sports. Now that day in September at Sports Stuff, Nate was going to hand over his money and take home the Brady ball and put it in the case his mom had bought for him on his birthday, the one that was waiting for him back in his room on his desk. All right, so the first question I'm going to ask you is, I want you to make a text to self connection. So what is something that you have saved your money for a long time and were able to purchase, or even you tried to save for it and you never were able to purchase it? So I want you to think about that one thing, write that on your paper, and then I want you to draw what you think that would look like, what your thing looks like. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. All right, if you're still drawing, that's fine, but I'm going to keep reading. Now that day, he had called the store right before they made the drive over, just to make sure that he hadn't miscalculated on the tax. His mom was carrying the envelope with the money in it in her purse, and there was the ball was when they got to the store, right where it always was, directly behind the cash register in the hall. High up on the shelf between a Kevin Garnett basketball and a bat signed by both David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez of the Red Sox. "I'd like to buy the Brady ball, please," Nate said, pointing up at it. The man said, "Sorry, kid, not for sale." But he must have seen what happened to Nate then. Nate actually could feel his legs buckling, as if somebody had brought him down from behind in the open field. So right away the man said, "Sorry, bad joke." Abby, standing next to Nate, said, "Just a bad joke? You're being way too easy on yourself, mister." The man laughed. "Who is she, your bodyguard?" And Nate had said something like that, just a lot tougher. It was when the ball was in Nate's hands, a ball that Brady had to have handled, if only long enough to sign it with a Sharpie, that Abby had noticed the entry forms. The man was still counting out the money at the time. While he did, Abby got right up on top of the little poster on the counter and started reading out loud. That was how she and Nate found out that Sports Stuff was sponsoring a promotion called the Sports Stuff $1 Million Throw. The winner of the contest was going to get the chance to make one throw from 30 yards away through a 20-inch hole at halftime of the Patriots' Thanksgiving night game against the Colts. Whoever made the throw would be handed a check for $1 million. The poster showed a picture of the Patriots' home stadium, Gillette Stadium. At midfield, they'd set up a billboard with Sports Stuff written in gigantic letters across it. Only the place in the middle where the two words should have connected was empty. That's where somebody would try to put the $1 million throw on Thanksgiving night. Abby was right on top of the poster now, squinting, somehow managing to read the contest rules. Nate said, "What do you have to do, go through some kind of tournament like you do in pass, punt, and kick?" "Nope," she said. Then she said to the man, "Borrow a pen, please." "What are you doing?" Nate said. "Getting a pen for you to sign up with." "Right." Abby looked at him, smiling her best smile, and said, "You could make a throw like that with your eyes closed, Brady." Always the eyes with her. Her favorite expression, one she used all the time, was about the eyes being the window to the soul. Nate wasn't sure he totally got that one, but he tried to act like he did. Even used it himself sometimes, never wanting Abby to think he was a step slow, keeping up with her in what he called the smart world. "I'm not signing up," he said. Yeah, Brady, you are, she said. It says right here that all you have to do to qualify is make a purchase of more than $500, which I believe you've just done, and be 13 or older. There it is. Game, set, match. The man behind the counter said, but if you're under the age of 18, you need a signature from a parent. Nate's mom said, he's got one of those right here. She signed. Nate signed. The man told him that at the end of the month, the winning member would be drawn on the CBS football pregame show, the one hosted by James Brown. It would be like one of those jackpot lottery drawings you saw all the time on television. You've got about the same odds as winning a lottery, the man said, but good luck anyway. Nate had taken his ticket home and put it in the trophy case with the Brady ball and hadn't taken it out until the day of the drawing. Watching with his parents and Abby as James Brown called out the winning numbers one after another. I want you to stop and jot your prediction here for what you think is going to happen. All right, let's find out. Every one of them was the number on Nate's ticket. They stopped dancing around and hugging and screaming, only when Nate's mom told them to hush so they could hear the representative from Sports Stuff say the winning numbers belonged to a 13-year-old from Western Massachusetts by the name of Nate Brody. That a boy who was now the most famous 13-year-old in America could get a chance on Thanksgiving night to make the throw of a lifetime. The man from Sports Stuff said $1 million throw from a 1 in a million kid. James Brown had said, hope he's a quarterback, and Nate said to the television, I am. So, also on your piece of paper, I want you to jot a couple notes about how you would feel if you were in Nate's shoes right now and you had the chance to make a throw and win $1 million. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that while I'm going to the next chapter. All right, so we're ready for chapter 3. And if any time you need longer to jot down your notes, you can pause this video and then go back to it. So chapter 3, we'll read this chapter today, and then we'll do chapter 4 and 5 on Saturday. Suddenly, Nate was famous, at least as famous as a 13-year-old from Valley, Massachusetts could be. Now, in Nate's living room, they had just watched a story about him on SportsCenter with some clips from the Hollins Hills game, including the throw he'd made down the sideline to Pete that we talked about in chapter 1. SportsCenter, Pete said as they watched the show in Nate's living room. That is as fresh as it gets. Fresh to death, Malcolm Burnley said. Liddell, the Patriots tailback, said, look at you throwing a ball to Mulaney on national TV. He shook his head and said, that's what I call putting your man suit on. Abby, sitting between Malcolm and Liddell on the couch, just sighed. You talk about SportsCenter like it's church. Church with highlights, Nate said. How did I end up being the lucky girl including in this boys' club? Abby said. You're not just in the club, Pete said. You're practically a member of the team, except you never have to get hit. Or end up at the bottom of the pile and the guy on top of you has breath that smells like feet, Malcolm said. Okay, Abby said, that's a little more information than I need. For all the other things that had happened since Nate won the lottery, the big feature about Nate in the Valley Dispatch, the one in the Boston Globe, another one on the NBC station out of Springfield, Massachusetts. The SportsCenter they just watched was the best of it, by far. It didn't matter what age you were or what sports you played. Being on SportsCenter was like having every sports fan in America going to your Facebook page. It was why Nate had invited Abby and some of the guys to come over and watch him after practice on Monday. Now the guys were getting ready to leave. Valley was a small enough town that Pete and Malcolm and Liddell would all be riding their bikes home. Abby wasn't going anywhere. She would be staying for dinner. Even though Nate hadn't made any big announcement about that, even if he hadn't, none of the guys would have said anything about it. They were all cool with the fact that Abby wasn't just part of their crew, she was Nate's best bud. A dude who happens to be a girl, Malcolm had said one time, an almost perfect combination. As soon as the words were out of his mouth, Abby had pinched him because that was her signature move when she thought one of them had stepped out of line. "What do you mean by almost a perfect combination, big boy?" Abby said. They didn't have TiVo anymore because things like that were too expensive in the Brody house these days. Now that just about everything, with the exception of the Brady ball, seemed too expensive. But they still had their old-fashioned VCR that had "Forehead" written over the place where you inserted the tape. So Sue Brody had taped SportsCenter, and when the guys were gone, Nate and Abby and his mom watched it one more time. When they finished, his mom got up and rewound the tape so it could be queued up to the exact right place when Nate's dad came home from work later. Then she said she needed to finish getting dinner ready. Nate thought her eyes looked watery, as if she were getting ready to cry about something. "You okay, Mom?" "Better than okay, actually. You sure?" She put a finger to one of her eyes and said, "You mean these? These are happy tears." "I never get that one," Nate said. "How can you be happy and sad at the same time? You'll understand when you're older." "I'm not sure I want to," Nate said. "I just want to enjoy every single moment of this," his mom said. "I just wish it was Thanksgiving night already," Nate said. "It will be here soon enough," she said. "You just promise me you're going to enjoy the journey." "I promise." Then his mom said, "And in this house, a promise is a promise," and headed off to the kitchen. Abby had moved over to a chair next to the window and was drawing in her sketchbook, even though she knew she only had a few minutes before they were going to sit down and eat. Abby McCall was good at just about everything. She was the smartest kid and the prettiest girl in 8th grade in Valley. Not that Nate would ever say the pretty part out loud to her or anyone else. But she was best at drawing. It didn't matter whether she was working with a pencil in the sketchbook she always seemed to have with her, or working with color combinations that only she seemed to be able to see on one of the canvases in her room. Because more than anything, Abby McCall thought of herself as an artist. And these days, she was painting even more than ever. Nate watched her now, not saying anything, seeing the concentration on her face, as if she were the only one taking a team down the field with less than 2 minutes to go, as if she were the one on the clock. "You gonna let me see that?" Nate said. "When I'm done," she said, not looking up, her right hand flying all over the page as if it had a mind of its own. "Your mom's right, you know," she said. "About what?" "About you enjoying all this and not putting too much pressure on yourself." "Come on, Abs," he said. "How can I not? I mean, if I ever make the throw, which I have no chance of actually making, that money would change everything for Mom and Dad. Starting with the fact that they wouldn't have to work so hard. My dad might go back to having one job instead of 2. So I want you to use your paper that you have and answer this question. So if you were Nate, I want you to write what you would do with the $1 million. So Nate wants to use it to keep his dad from having to work 2 jobs because they don't have a lot of money. So I want you to write what you would do. So pause this video if you need more time to write, but I'm going to keep reading. "I heard that," Sue Brody yelled from the kitchen. "You can worry about money when you're a dad someday. We'll handle it around here until then." Abby closed her sketchbook, walked over to where Nate was sitting on the couch, and pinched him hard on his left non-throwing arm. "I thought we had a deal," she said. "Did we not have a deal?" We did. And the deal, as I recall, went something like this. This isn't a job for you, it's an adventure." So his mom is trying to take some of the pressure off of him. Nate grinned. "I'm almost positive you stole that from somebody. You do not want to tangle with me on this," Abby said. "You're the one who's always telling me that the very best parts of sports is how it can make a new memory for you practically every day. And right now," sorry, I lost my place. "And right now you've got a memory going that will last both of us our whole lives, whether you make the throw or not." She called out to Nate's mom, asked how much time there was before dinner, was told 5 minutes, and went back to her chair. She opened her sketchbook back up and put her face close to the paper that Nate thought her nose was going to touch as she studied her word. "Even though you are going to make that throw," she added. "How can you be sure?" "You know me," Abby said. "I see things nobody else does." They had a rule, Nate and Abby. He never looked in her sketchbook without permission, but he was allowed to ask to see something, which is what he did now. The two of them sitting out on the Brody's small screened-in back porch after dinner. Nate asked to see what she'd drawn when they'd been inside watching SportsCenter. Okay, she said, opening up the book, leafing through pages of drawings. Nate knew he'd probably never see the ones that were for her eyes only. But I want you to know it's nothing you're going to want to slap a frame on, Brady. It's just a fun thing. It was an amazing fun thing. Nate knew how fast she'd done it. Knew it should have looked like the first draft of one of his papers for school with scratch-outs and corrections all over the page. Only it didn't look that way at all. Somehow, just using her pencil, it was like she'd taken a picture of what the room had looked like with all of them sitting there in front of the television. She'd imagined it as if she were on the side in front of the picture window. So you saw Malcolm's face from the side and Liddell's and Pete's. You saw Nate more clearly and his mom. Somehow you felt how intensely they'd all been focused on the set, which is where Abby had some fun, having a football flying out of it as if it were on its way through the window and out of the room. A fun thing, Nate said. Abs, this is awesome. Awesomely awesome. It's okay, Mr. Art Critic, she said. I could have done better with the picture inside the screen, so I took the easy way out with the flying football. Yeah, that's obviously going to take your grade way down, he said. She leaned over as if a pinch were coming, making Nate flinch, and making both of them laugh. You know as much about art as you do needlepoint, she said, You know as much about art as you do needlepoint, she said, or pedicures. I know enough to know what's good and what isn't, he said, and I know you're as tough on yourself after you draw as I am on myself after a game, even if we've won. Nate pointed to her book and said, How come you're not in the picture? She closed it up and said, You know me. I like to be invisible and let everybody else tell the story. Wait till you see what I'm going to come up with the night you make the bazillion-dollar throw. He smiled at her, but then smiling at Abby McCall at the things she said and the things she drew and the way she was, felt as natural to Nate as throwing a football. They had always gone to school together, lived a block away from each other. Nate couldn't remember a time when he hadn't been best friends. Not Nate's girlfriend, just best friends. Mostly, she was just Abby. Nate's mom called her a force of nature. She must have felt him staring at her as she looked out into the backyard with night falling. Nate wondering, as always, what she really saw. What, she said. Nothing. Don't nothing me. I was just thinking. She turned and smiled back at him. Always a good thing, at least until it starts to give you a headache. I was just thinking, he said, how great it would be if we could just keep talking about me making that throw and being excited about me making the throw, but me never actually having to go through and make it. We've already been over this 100 times. You're going, and I'm going with you. Nate said, Where else would you be? Exactly, she said. That night, I'll be up in the stands cheering you on as you put the ball through the silly hole, and we'll live happily ever after. Nate didn't say anything to that because he never knew what to say when Abby said something like that. It was almost completely quiet now in the back of the house. Nothing from inside the house where Nate's mom was reading. No traffic sounds from out front. You have to see me do it, Nate said. Don't worry, she said. I will. But you said, forget what I said. Things have been so bad lately. You never say things are bad. This is another thing we've gone over, Brady, about 12,000 times. Things aren't good or bad with me. They just are what they are. I don't want them to be what they are. Abby said, This isn't one of your games. You can't control everything because you're the best player on the field. She smiled again, the boy with the golden arm. Doesn't mean I can't want to, Nate said. And guess what, Abby said. When I hear the crowd that night after you make your throw, I'll be able to see everything perfectly. They both knew she was lying, because the truth about Abby McCall was that she was going blind. So, there were several hints in that, in what we've read so far, that led to that. So, Abby McCall is going blind, Nate's best friend. So, we'll read more about her tomorrow and more about Nate tomorrow. So, again, this is not mandatory. This is just a resource for you. Hope you have a great rest of your Friday, and I'll talk to you guys soon.